The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr Speaker, the new year is an opportunity for a fresh start. Traditionally, people make resolutions that seek to cut back on the excesses they indulged in the year before. It seems that the National Government has yet to decide on its New Year resolutions. So I decided that maybe I could save them the hassle and put together a list of resolutions that National can adopt, which would help New Zealand. The first resolution should be to slim down. The National Government, after 2 years of binging, has made government bigger than ever. Total government expenditure reached just over $81 billion in 2010. That is almost 43 cents in every dollar earned. Such expenditure is financed by borrowing around $300 million every week, simply because the amount of tax that goes into the government coffers is less than they spend. With the government so big, is it any surprise that our economy is not getting off the ground? Growth in the New Zealand economy remains at around 1%. When the economy is leashed to a weight that spends over 40 cents in every dollar, it is easy to see why we are going nowhere. In the meantime, we see other countries like Singapore float away with average annual growth rates of 4% or more. There the government spends a mere 17 cents in every dollar. This might in fact be all right if we were getting better services than Singapore. The reality, however, is that not only does our spending make us poorer than Singapore, but across the board we also have worse poverty, worse education, healthcare and crime, and the list goes on. Forecasts show that Australia will be 42% wealthier than New Zealand by 2025. Because of this, 412,000 New Zealanders, the equivalent of all the residents in the Wellington region, are likely to leave for Australia over the next 15 years. The first New Zealand resolution that we should have is clear: slim down. I find it unbelievable that National, who rightly complain so bitterly about the years of wasteful spending by the Labor government, suddenly when they get into power, they cannot find any wasteful expenditure to cut. To the contrary, they seem to have borrowed more money to spend. The simple truth is, Mr Speaker, we will never spend or tax ourselves to prosperity. It is a shame that National still needs to learn that basic lesson. The second resolution should be to focus on what really matters. The core services such as education, health and welfare, 65% of core government expenditure, are very important government services. However, government has been increasingly bad at providing them. Our education system is failing our young people. A third of school leavers fail to achieve NCEA level 2 or higher. For Maori, 56%, Mr Speaker, will not gain NCEA level 1 or above before they leave school. Some of our schools are so unsafe that the police are stationed within them. A classroom surrounded by police officers is not a proper learning environment. So it's hardly surprising that 30,000 school students cut class every day. Children are voting with their feet and choose to be away from dilapidated classrooms, rigid curricula, violence and the monotony of the classroom environment. In education, the government should resolve to empower parents. In welfare, 13% of the adult population are receiving a benefit. This is compared to 2% in 1960. Approximately 1 in 5 Kiwi children will live on benefit in a benefit-dependent household. Recent figures show over 350,000 people are on some type of benefit. For every 6 workers, 1 person is on a benefit. Add in superannuation and the ageing population, and it is likely that our children will live in a world where for every 1 person receiving a government handout, they will be supported by just 2 workers. This is simply not sustainable. In health, the number of practicing physicians is 2.3 per 1,000 people. This is almost 1 fewer per 1,000 people than the OECD average. The number of hospital beds per 1,000 is 6.2. This is over 1 hospital bed fewer than the world average. Every year, hundreds of people continue to die on waiting lists because our health system is overstretched. If government tax-funded money could solve all these problems, New Zealand would have solved them already. We spend vast amounts on all these areas but get substandard service in return. We have made ourselves poorer to afford all this. But do we get the kind of services we want? We need to rethink the approach in all of these areas. In welfare, the government should resolve to get 2/3 of those on benefit back to work. Despite unemployment reducing sharply between 1999 and 2008, expenditure on welfare soared. Part of this was done by transferring people on sickness and invalid benefits. We will never solve the problem by just moving people around. The number of people on sickness and invalid benefit has increased by almost 70% in the last decade. In that period, the population increased by 12% and spending on health almost doubled. It is very difficult to argue that these figures represent a declining level of health in the population. Rather, it seems for some that it has become a lifestyle rather than a transition. In health, the government should resolve to restore the right incentives. If we look at other places around the world, we can find practical templates to model our healthcare system on. Singapore has one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Infant mortality and life expectancy are amongst the best in the world. However, what makes it amazing is its cost effectiveness. The government spends very little money making it a good system. The Singapore government spent between 1 and 3% of GDP annually on healthcare. To contrast, New Zealand spends between 8 and 9% of GDP. What Singapore does is make it compulsory to have health savings accounts in which individuals pre-save for medical conditions, and they have a catastrophic insurance on top of that. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand's outlook is bleak. Today we sit in a position similar to that or to the one that we had in 1984. The difference, though, is that in 1984 we made tough decisions. We outlined the goal we wanted to achieve and moved swiftly to attain it. The public were supportive because they were able to see what we wanted to achieve and returned the government with an increased majority in 1987. The point is, we did this by pursuing the right policies, not by doing what might be popular in the short term. If you cast your mind back over the last 2 years of the national government, can you think of one piece of quality reform that has made New Zealand better off and will be remembered by anyone in 10 years' time? I find it somewhat amusing for a party that has spent 9 years in opposition, arguing against most of the changes brought about by Labor, working for families, the lack of privatisation, the abolition of youth rates, freezing of tariff, the re-regulation of the labour market, amongst others, and then do nothing about them when in power. The National Party don't seem to get it, and until they try to set the agenda rather than follow blindly what Labor leave in their wake, they will continue to fail New Zealanders.